again. We
You as
obviously
well.
can, yeah, so I'm excited to have this session with you and welcome everyone. I think it's probably best, Michael, you want to kick it off and give yourself a little background on you and your role and uh, so forth, and then I'll do a little bit by same, and then we'll get into really the purpose of this, which Michael and I are going to talk to you guys about really the challenges of last year and being innovative, but specifically being innovative around content and how specifically Michael used a lot of his existing media and shifted it to be more innovative in the content in this world, whether it's on platforms and interaction. And then obviously I will give a little kind of more breadth to that as StreamElements has developed a lot of engaging kind of content platforms during this COVID time as well. Michael, I'll kick it off over to you.
Absolutely. So, again, Michael Craig with Harman International, Senior Director overseeing our global creative as well as our gaming platform with the recent launch of JBL Quantum. I've been with the company for a little under 2 years, and have had a tremendous experience, kind of getting to know the industry and learning a lot about sound and the importance that it plays in people's lives.
Great, great. I appreciate that, Michael. Again, thanks for joining. We're excited. And for myself, Sean Horvath, StreamElements, and quick little background on I joined the company a year ago. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, and StreamElements' purpose is they provide the operating system for all live streamers to actually broadcast across Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and utilizing these audience tools that they broadcast through our cloud-based system. We work with advertising partners on really immersive programs. We have not worked with Michael, but have worked with other partners like Pepsi and P&G and Mondelez in this space, just to really impact content and make it more engaging so that the way the viewer's just not watching, but they're engaged and kind of connecting with the creator.
And don't worry, Sean, if you play your cards right today, we might be able to work something out.
Well, that's Michael. I appreciate that. Although not the purpose, but thank you. So, Michael, I think yesterday it was really exciting when you and I first spoke. We talked a lot about how data had been, everyone's media is focused a lot on data. And while you need the data for scale and purpose and to really target the audience, that it's taken in the past year or so, like a little bit out of the content and what the purpose of content is and how that makes more engaging. So I'd love to start off with what you shared with me yesterday of how you guys faced that this year. And then I think we can probably apply it a little more down to gaming and put a little more into the verticals of how it did. But talk about the challenges, because I think that's a great topic overall.
Absolutely. So I think any marketer was excited as kind of this wave of big data was kind of being unleashed kind of across most of the things that we were doing, where you knew that you can actually go out and find consumers where they were when they were most primed to make a purchase. You knew how to find them in those channels and really communicate with them very effectively. And I think the tendency there, or at least the thing that you were tempted to do was push them directly down to the bottom of the funnel. Like, hey, I know where you are. I know you might be leaning towards this, and so let me just push you through the bottom of that funnel to really unlock this additional sale. And when that happens, you start to forget like some of the fun stuff that is supposed to be happening at the top of that funnel, and that's where the foundation of your brand is really being built. I like to use the analogy of of agriculture. Like when you're at the top of that funnel, like you're really planting the seeds for the future. So these are things that will not pay off today or tomorrow, but you know 6 months from now, when someone is actually entering into a marketplace, if you played your cards right, if you've actually done the work at the top of that funnel, then it's way easier to escort them down through the conversion phase. And I think again with the advent of the big data and that the movement behind that, it's really been tempting to jump straight to the bottom. And so as the world has evolved over the last year, I think what we've seen is kind of the resurgence of the importance of the top of that funnel, the content that's being created, the engagement that you're looking to really establish with consumers. And I think it became even more important just because people were now, in front of their computers, multiple hours out of the day, searching for additional content, searching for additional things that they could engage with, that they would find compelling. And I think it's forced us to say, like, hey, I can't, at some point, I can't just continue to push the sell. I need to give you something else to really attach yourselves to, and something that I want you to know about my brand and the things that we're doing. And so we've really, kind of ridden that wave and kind of seen the importance of that, and have been having a lot of active conversations about how can we deepen our storytelling and really get to a place of driving that real connectivity with consumers.
Michael, are you the champion of this internally, and are you fighting kind of other people from the data sense? Because obviously data creates more efficiencies and some things. So are you the lone champion in this, or do you think collectively the organization has embraced your thinking here?
So I think, I mean, I work with a group of marketers who remember a time when there was no big data to really attach yourself to. And so as we started having these conversations, I think it led us down a path where, you can start to dream and imagine a little bit and take yourself back to that place when you first fell in love with marketing, when you first fell in love with storytelling and advertising, and really, again, capturing the hearts and minds of consumers. And so whereas it wasn't the conversation we started out having initially, especially in a time when there was so much uncertainty, and budgets are froze and then they're unfroze, and we need to
Yep.
do something. Okay, we'll hold off. Again, the temptation was, if I'm going to spend money, I need to make sure this is driving directly to conversion. And then as we started to see, the behavior of consumers start to shift around a bit, it led us to a place where we could pause and say, hey, wait a minute, there may be actually, this might actually be the right moment for us to
Right.
really pause and take another look at, again, how we're looking to engage with consumers.
Yeah. And it's important to add too that the data can, for anyone out there, and I'm sure you charge your agencies, whoever, whether it be social or your media or creative, like the platforms have tremendous amounts of data on them,
Hmm.
right? So to be pushing on the platforms to give you that information, whether you're aligning with gaming or females or males,
Hmm.
they have so much data to focus the content verticals or the influencers, or Abby, that it's a collection of data and they're not
Yes,
siloed. And a lot of times I think
absolutely.
people silo. Did you find that it was somewhat siloed, or do you find that everyone's kind of working together nicely to share that info?
I think it pushed it to be a little bit more of a more complex conversation. But once the conversation started, I think people were all on board, because again, it's about, again, unlocking what this could potentially mean for the business as you move forward. And I think as we started to have those more complex conversations of, yeah, I know that we typically were using the data to go do this one specific thing, but what if we tapped into more of that data and help let that help us to inform this broader range of activities that we could really go off and go
Yeah.
tackle.
Yeah, I mean, we've had similar experiences as us at StreamElements, because that all the streamers using our platform lie on top of the product APIs of the bigger platforms, Twitch, YouTube, etc. The data we get overall about viewing, types of games and audiences, conversion and stuff, it so feeds into like a lot of the strategies when we work with some of the bigger companies out there. Not from just a brand safety, but more specifically, like, hey, I want to dual target moms and kids, and how do I know which games do that, because it's hard to track? Well, that Animal Crossing and Fortnite and all these other games, statistically, that you have to dig deeper into the data and show what's trending, and then deliver that audience that way. So
Absolutely.
I think I'd love, talk about a little bit of how you applied, right?
Mhm.
Your job's twofold, right? So how you applied to the launch of really running the gaming vertical here, and how you took that thinking with content over to an area that obviously was exploding, but
Mhm.
can also be scary, for a new team getting into it because
Yes,
of the chatter and how loyal that audience is. It's got to be really approached with the deep thought. So talk a little bit
absolutely.
about moving over that and applying that strategy over to gaming.
Absolutely. And I think, speaking of deep thought, I mean, this process to enter gaming, began, probably 2017, 2018, where we obviously weren't the first people to realize that sound could be important in these gaming platforms, and it's really a marketplace that had existed for roughly 10 years or so before we got onto it, but we actually thought that we were coming in at the right time, because whereas in gaming, the visuals of the game had really evolved very quickly from when I first picked up a controller some number of years ago. The sound had lagged a bit, and so there was there was not as much energy that had gone into sound design. And being in a company where we work with some of the best sound engineers in the business, like, they need a big challenge to go after. And I think they were waiting for the sound and gaming to really get to a place where they thought that they could layer on some of that special JBL engineering sauce to really bring it to life in the right way. And so we took roughly 2 years to really start to develop that product, and or the line of products, and really took the time to talk to consumers, to gamers within the space, and understand
Right.
what's really important to them, when it comes to gaming headsets. And we found out very, very clearly that it's the clarity of the communication, it's the immersive nature of the sound itself, but it's also the comfort. You need to
Comfort.
be able to wear them for
Oh
6,
yeah.
8, 10, 12 hours in a day, and not feel like your head is being squeezed. And so
Hmm.
once we latched on to those things, we developed 7 different products that we hit the market with, which was extremely aggressive, but we felt like we were onto something. We wanted to make sure that we created something at every price point that allowed multiple consumers to really tap into it from wherever they were entering into the space. But then we had to get on to how do we actually introduce this
Hmm.
to the masses. And so
Right.
if we rewind back to the end of 2019, I had the most perfect marketing gaming launch strategy that the world had ever seen. Like, it
And
was
I'm sure you were hitting up big. I'm sure you were. I'm sure you were hitting up big experiences like E3 and yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was the perfect plan. And we felt like, it was going to position us well again to enter into a lot of these spaces where we knew gamers were going to be congregating, and give them the opportunity to really engage with the product in real life, and allow those consumers to really help us to kind of push our story out to their friends and to their gaming teammates, etc.
Yep.
But then a funny thing happened, on the way to me, framing that perfect marketing launch strategy, that really impacted a lot of folks' lives in a bunch of different ways. And so we found ourselves in February, March, with potential deals in hand of things that we were going off to go do that may have not made the same amount of sense at that point. So again, like, looking at what we were ultimately trying to accomplish, which was, can we build and establish quickly
Yep.
credibility within the minds of gamers? How can we do that? And whereas in a pre-COVID world, we had one set of plans to go off and do that, as the impacts of COVID really became real, we had to quickly adjust, and figure out how do we still go into this marketplace, still gain the credibility that we're looking to gather, and launch the product in a way that could lead us to some form of success in this extremely uncertain time. And so we looked at building credibility both with gamers, and so really went out to partner with one of the more preeminent
Yep.
lifestyle and gaming organizations, with 100 Thieves.
Yep.
And again, like, that deal was structured one way as we sat down to write it at first, and then
Yep.
as things started to pivot, then we looked at how do we tap into them and their content creation mechanism, and really help to, again, have them help us to tell that story.
Yep.
And on the flip side, we also were looking at going into esports, and we're having a lot of conversations within that space, and that's also one that was tremendously impacted, as the whole idea of getting 5, 10, 15,000 people into a venue to
Yep.
watch
It's
some of the best
gone.
gamers play. It's over.
Yeah.
And so with that, we still knew that we needed that element, and working with my gaming agency Petrol, who were amazing in this journey, we were able to frame up our own gaming event, our own esports event, the JBL Quantum Cup at the end of last year, which again was built off of a lot of the same the same insights that we had originally entered into, but just the framing was different. And working through in this world where people still want to connect, and gaming was still a big connection point for a lot of consumers. How could we place ourselves as an enabler for kind of a one of its first of its kind gaming event that allowed us
Yeah.
to be seen in the arena that we wanted to be seen in, and gain the credibility that we were ultimately trying to gain within year one.
Huge challenges, right? I mean, and listen, yeah, I mean, and listen, I think a lot of people in obviously in the industry, not just in gaming overall, had, whether it was experiential budgets set against live sports, right? Whether it be broadcast or in market live sports activations, right? That scurry there was a universal change, but again, you were so emphasis on content, right? It's easy to change pre-roll and other media, right? But when you've got planned activations and experience and build out and stuff, to all of a sudden change to a complete shift of content online, where you can't necessarily touch and feel it, or hear the sound, right, yourself, then going through those creators. I'd love, why don't you can you give an example of what you're really proud of, whether it would be one creator, one of the activations you did there, to put that into perspective for the content? I think everyone would love to hear it.
Absolutely. And so I mentioned, briefly about the JBL Quantum Cup. And I think the reason why it was something that, we were extremely proud of, again, is because you generally need to be a known entity to get people to care what you're doing in the esports space. And so we knew that we were taking a huge risk, looking to jump headfirst into the space, and attaching ourselves to esports and to some of the largest or hottest games within that space, coming in as almost as an unknown. But we had a couple of things at our disposal, and that we had made some friends along the way. As we had sent out products as brands like ours are apt to do around launch time. People had a chance to play with the product and were willing to vouch for it. And so when we came back around with these opportunities, I think there were people who were willing to answer the phone and say, "Hey, I think you might be onto something." Quite interesting.
Yeah.
Like let's keep the conversations going. And so some of the things that again, conversations we had started earlier that weren't going to pan out in the way that they had originally been framed, were now being reframed for this new purpose. And we were also again able to tap into the guys from 100 Thieves, because they had been such tremendous partners and are obviously a huge name within the space. If we're coming in with the product that the folks who have been exposed to are loving, we're being walked in with an extremely credible partner, who was also willing to roll up their sleeves and help us to build out something of impact. I think it starts to change how we were being looked at as this kind of unknown brand within gaming that was looking to do something fairly substantial. And so from that, we were able to build out essentially a 3-day tournament where we had some of the top teams and some of the top games in Fortnite, Valorant, and PUBG participate across 3 separate global regions. And so we had
Awesome.
we had tournaments in the US, we had tournaments in Europe, and we had tournaments in Asia. And obviously this is all still virtual, but everything was really crafted and built out so that the consumers within those regions were really willing to tune in at a time that was perfect for them, see the players that they were excited about seeing, and enjoy this experience, and ultimately name a few JBL Quantum Cup champions along the way. And it's funny, the one thing that we were talking about is in terms of building credibility is, how do you know when you started to establish that level of credibility? Like there's no credibility meter that you can just kind of tap into and say like, yesterday we were at a 4 and today we're at a 6. But I can say that this morning I woke up and was reading through some of the headlines that get fed to me, and there was an article that mentioned a team that I won't mention now, but how they were doing some shakeups on the Valorant side, and it's like, this team, they did fairly well, like they finished top 4 in the JBL Quantum Cup, but now they're looking to make some evolutions. I'm like, oh snap, like that's my thing. We built that, and now people are quoting it as a moment in this gaming universe, which is it's an amazing feeling. But it's also one of those things that like helps you to recognize when you partner up with the right folks, when you go in with the right mindset, and you're willing to be flexible,
Yep.
in terms of, really, what you're willing to do, to hit those goals, sometimes some magic can be unlocked.
Yeah, it definitely can be unlocked. And with Thieves, it's a great situation because, and people have to remember, obviously there's a difference between gaming and esports, right? You and I talked a
Yes.
little bit about that yesterday. But ultimately, esports in those arenas, they're packed by fans that are there to see those gamers. Where do they see them normally? Still online, right? It puts you in a special place to be in that experience because they can touch that streamer, so to speak, more. But the everyday communication is online. So it's still natural to go back and form that tournament like you did.
Hmm.
It's just about having the partner to quickly do it,
Hmm.
assemble it, and activate it there.
Absolutely.
And did you find was the program overall, in this case, obviously you want to drive sales, you would drive the needle. Was there a conversion expectation? Was there a component to that? It was purely more about awareness and recognition in the community to validate who you guys are first and foremost versus so pushing sales that could turn them off.
Yeah, and that was our mindset going into it. I mean, it happened, during Q4, which is a huge selling season, for us. And so, obviously the impetus generally during that window is like, how can we move more product? But we were really careful with this, again, because we knew that, whereas if I can impress you, or impress upon you my desire to enter into this space in the right way, and that JBL and JBL Quantum was the product, was the brand behind this event that you're experiencing, for this particular weekend. I'm planting that seed again, going back to that agricultural reference earlier. And so everyone who tuned in wasn't even in the market for a headset. There were a few folks who likely were, and who went to check us out, and we definitely saw, a bit of a bump, while we were live. But I mean, we're looking to play the long game. You can't come in, 10 years late, and try to recoup, on that 10 years in the first 8 months of being in the business. And so that, we really were, we really did hold back a bit on trying to be overly aggressive in terms of trying to drive sales, during the event, and really made it the experience that we know that gamers really want to tune in for. And you mentioned it earlier, like, these are the folks that they look up to. These are the folks that they try to pattern their own games after. I don't want to interrupt, that engagement and that interaction that they're having with some of their favorite gamers by, continuously just trying to push my brand, or a buy message, down their throat in that moment. And again, like, the whole desire is, if you do it right, and you capture their hearts and their minds, they'll come back to you. And I think,
Yep.
the brands who do it right have been able to do that quite, efficiently and effectively over the years. And we want to be, seen as one of those brands.
Yeah. And I think it's important because live content allows you to do that more online, right? So like a tournament style, and people always, I think a lot of times when they're looking at content online, they look at YouTube or Instagram and posts that influencers do versus the live component of those platforms and the content made there. It is so different, the communication tactics to
Hmm.
deploy. It's obviously different on the technology and from our standpoint, but from the engagement side, uh, it's phenomenal. But brands are a little scared to be there, right, because of the unknown.
Absolutely.
Yeah, talk about a little bit of, I mean, obviously gaming, you guys had to be in the live space because it's so prevalent online. But I mean, were there any apprehensions internally with that from the live space, education that you had to do? Um, it's and particularly with COVID, everyone's using video more, right? So it's
Hmm.
in their mindset. So it should be easier to embrace given what we're doing versus a year ago. Talk about that a little bit,
Yeah,
those challenges.
I think any brand person knows that, the whole idea of sitting your brand into a space where you cannot be almost wholly protective of it, it requires a lot of courage, to do. And I think, when you start talking about gamers, and that the universe, that they occupy, they have no apprehension whatsoever in letting you know when you, have not, come correct in their eyes. When you have, stepped out of bounds, like, they have no apprehension in terms of, like, really letting you know that. And so it's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to put my brand in this live space. It's another thing to say, I'm going to put my brand in the live space with gamers who are again are very apt to kind of share their opinions in real time about not just you, your brand, or the product that you're looking to promote. In the event as well, right? So if it's not a well produced event, if the game itself is not, you know, not up to par, if the participants are not the ones that they wanted to see, like these are all opinions that will be shared in very real time with you. And so there's a certain nervousness that's, you know, wrapped up in an endeavor like that. So yeah, there was absolutely a lot of education that had to happen, you know, myself included. You know,
Yeah.
my agency pulling me off of the ledge as I'm, you know, watching, you know, previous tournaments and, you know, tuning into Twitch to kind of see what's going on. It's like, yeah, this is the conversation that happens in the
Yeah,
chat. Are
it can
you
be a little scary. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly?
yeah, yeah.
Are you really ready for this? And so, you know, the thing is, like, yeah, we want to enter into their space, and you know, we want to establish ourselves in the right way. So that means that we have to be where they are, and be willing to open ourselves up to everything that potentially, you know, comes with standing back on the confidence that we have an amazing brand, we're
Yep.
developing and have delivered an amazing product, and now we're hoping to deliver an amazing production, and put the work in to make sure that all three of those things are true going into that.
And mind you, you put a lot of thought into the development of the product and listen to those people as well, which is a huge step in the process, right?
Absolutely.
We've done a lot of focus groups with like Western Digital, for example, for hardware products that they've done the same thing. They've come to us and say, hey, let's create focus groups, digital focus groups, so we understand this product. COVID problems, right? You had to do it this way.
Hmm.
Send them the product. They touch focus groups, and it's really to get those insights can be life changing, right? Like you said, comfort.
Absolutely.
These streamers and their audiences will have it on for eight to 12 hours sometimes. And with COVID, it sounds crazy. And as a parent, I see my own kid at 5 hours a day. But that was key, I think, into your guys' success there.
Absolutely, and you mentioned insights, and I am a huge fan of insights and just engaging with consumers to really understand, you know, what are the things that you can do that really move the needle. And then I know you hit walls sometimes with people saying like, oh, you know, Henry Ford said this about talking to consumers, and Steve Jobs said this about, you know, talking to consumers, and it's like, yeah, I'm not those guys though.
Right.
I'd love to say that at some point I'd be, you know, a marketing and a manufacturing genius, but that's just not the lot that was assigned to me. And so for the rest of us, we need to look at the data, you know, and make sure that the data is amazing. Having access to great data leads to great insights. Having great insights, you know, can really lead to great kind of creative concepts. Those creative concepts can then lead to great creative. And if you have great creative, then that's really when you can start to form those amazing connections with consumers. But if at any point in that chain you take your eye off of greatness, you let something mediocre slide through, the whole process gets blown up, and you end up with something that's subpar. And I think that's the challenge that we all have,
Yep.
as marketers going down that path, is like making sure that we are staying, you know, maniacally focused on, you know, not allowing any garbage into the system, so that what comes out on the back end is something that is going to check off on all of the boxes that we've deemed important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's crucial to it. You know, I think a point in there that struck me, and I was having a conversation with someone last week, is that, you know, so many times in marketing, we're also focused on our quadrants, our product, and dates we have to achieve, and then that messaging, right? And what we've learned in this past year of life is that with the consumer being home so much, it's you need to market to them to their speed,
Hmm. Absolutely.
right? You need to market to them the way they want to be marketed to now, right? And to rapidly change that in the home when their mindset is something is so different. You
Hmm.
know, I've had so many clients. I spoke to, I think it was Kohl's about this, even Avocados of America about this, right? It was the notion that it wasn't, it was actually like you did, it was talked about changing the strategy, right? Like
Hmm.
we know we have product launches, we know we have to promote this, we know we have to do this, but wait a minute, these people aren't in the same way anymore. So if we're
Hmm.
creating content, uh, I need to listen to how the consumer wants it created,
Hmm.
right? And now
Absolutely.
with gaming, it makes it a little easier, to do that, but it's still the overall message of listening to what the consumer wants, not just like what you guys need internally to hit certain data points or strategic points.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, I'm curious, outside of Twitch, like any other, other platforms for content, TikTok, Reddit, right? I mean, there's obviously all these big, we always focus on the Twitches and the YouTube and Facebook. Obviously, that's where a lot of media spending goes and stuff. But, I'm curious with TikTok and like Reddit's not obviously live, but, have you guys, not necessarily even in the gaming, but overall looked at those spaces and content across there and how to utilize those platforms differently?
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's always going to be core, I think, going along with your message around hitting consumers where they are, is like consumers won't always be where you expected them to be, especially with technology moving at the rate that it does now. If an agency comes into me presenting me just a television ad, it's like, yeah, we've missed. If you come in presenting me just an idea that's focused on just one digital video, or just one quote unquote Facebook post or whatever, you know that you've missed the mark. And so
Right.
one of the things that we for gaming, as well as for the broader business, push our agencies on consistently is, don't come to me with just a bunch of stuff. Come to me with the thing, like the
Yep.
thing that and show me how that thing comes to life in all of the multiple touch points in which my consumer might be. And if there are places that where my consumer might be that we haven't talked about, that we haven't endeavored to engage with in the past, like that's the other thing that I'm pushing my agencies to do, is help me to identify like these new paths forward, these new places where we could continue to engage. And so both with gaming as well as with our broader portfolio of sound products, looking at every tool that that Facebook releases, every tool that Google releases, looking at TikTok, and not just that people are on it, but how it's being used, and how you might be able to, again, join that conversation in a way that does not disrupt the fun and kind of the intent of the channel itself. And again, like, this is not a conversation you can have once a year. This is a conversation you need to have
all the time.
exactly every time we connect. We need to be talking about how those things are going to happen. So absolutely, Twitch was a new thing for us from a gaming perspective, but in engaging with them, we also recognize like this is also something that we could very easily tap into for music, because consumers are starting to move there to see their favorite DJs, to see their favorite performers perform live. And so even in just having that initial conversation that was based on gaming, it broadened our horizons in terms of what might be possible for the future. And so again, we are always having those conversations and looking at how can we tap into these different platforms and utilize them to do the things that we need them to do, and to engage with consumers in the way that we want to.
Yeah, and I think you had you said something really key there, that how consumers are using those platforms changes all the time through the year,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And it changes by ultimately the content overall messaging. And so, and if anything proves that it's this year, right? We went into the year in a political situation, right? Got into a COVID that then launched different types of, the Black Lives Matter movement was always going on, but it increased it even more with the COVID and the impacts and the racial. So all these things play into content.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
It plays into TikTok content of people having music to that, the Fleetwood Mac Dreams video, if you remember, of the guy skateboarding. Right. So it's funny because people think, oh, they're platforms and they're just the audiences, but everything going around in our world plays into it, even down to, I'm sure with you guys with streamers, you launch, well, there's political conversations going on. And when someone's streaming for 4 hours, they're just not talking gaming.
Right.
Their audience is there talking life too,
Absolutely.
Right? Did you guys, and you must have obviously considered all these things because you lean so heavily into the content, right? Were those conversations happening all throughout?
You have to. And I think it's a part of what comes with seeing these channels as not advertising channels or just opportunities to advertise or push your product. these channels are tools for conversations, and these are conversations that consumers are having all the time. And so, yes, you can be the one that drops in an abrupt ad that stops the conversation so that you can, work this brand message in, or you can find unique ways to join the conversation, or more importantly, sometimes is determine when that's a conversation that you're not adept to be a part of
You're part of,
at
yeah,
this point.
at the moment. Yep.
Like, no, people are talking about this thing. This thing is way more important than this thing that you're trying to say. Put a
Yep.
pause on that thing that you're trying to say and let this conversation unfold. And if you have something of value to add to that conversation, then do that, but still tread lightly, because in some of these instances, people aren't looking to hear from you. And then a
Yep.
lot of times, if what you're saying is not substantial, then it ends up doing more harm than good. And so I think, again, approaching all of this as these are conversations that are taking place across all of these channels, and really making sure that you're figuring out that, if this is the right moment for you to drop in whatever that thing was that you were hoping to share with consumers, and still make sure that you do it in the right way, in the way that is fitting of the channel, and the way that the channel is currently being used, not the way that we did it 2,
Yep.
3, 5 years ago.
Yeah. It's interesting too. And I'll tell you what's great about live is it allows you to change real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you produce content yourself, or if you're producing within maybe a set of creators YouTube content, which normally is an 8-week process or longer, right? It's not, you can adapt sometimes that quick,
Mm-hmm.
right? And with the live space this year, I mean, I'll tell you 2 instances for us, both in June. Bounty, we were obviously launching a big campaign, and it was the first time doing deep content with gaming. They had done media. You had the height of the pandemic when paper towels aren't even on shelves.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They didn't want to cancel, because this is the best time to embrace. But how do we do this very lightly in the content and have some more fun with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And lean into this audience, right, with it,
Right.
which was, and we had to change positioning quick and branding.
Mm-hmm.
A client like Nutter Butter, which National Peanut Butter Day was in June, and it fell on like the biggest day of some of the movements, right, happening across the cities. They're like,
Right.
We're like, look, this is going down. We need to shift. You want a 12-hour activation on Twitch? I called the client. I'm like, we can't do this. This
Mm-hmm.
is not the weekend to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
We moved it 2 weeks. We changed the messaging. At that point, people needed a little bit of relief,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was conversations going on Twitch, but it was about changing the messaging, having fun, and working with the streamers to make sure they announced at the beginning of the broadcast, look, we're gonna have some fun today. We all need a break.
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to do that with live,
Absolutely.
right? And even with live television, you're able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to make it about digital or live events to some extent. That's the power of it. And I don't think people necessarily embraced it enough during this time frame. I want to be careful of time. I think we've got around 5 or so minutes left for you and I talking. Talk about 2021 for you, obviously, because we're still faced with just as many challenges, at least probably going through the first half of this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how are you going to take the learnings, obviously, from last year and build upon that, right? Because that's got to be your goal now.
Yeah. So I think there are probably 2 big things that we're really focused on as we get into 2021. I think the closer one is gaming, and I think now the benefit within gaming is we're going into a world that is not that dissimilar from the one that we just exited in 2020, and so we know a little bit about how to operate within this space. We'll plan this year as if it will be loosely similar to what was happening last year, and like, let's not place huge bets on in-person events, et cetera. But again, like, how do we look to deepen our relationship with gamers? And again, I mentioned earlier that we launched with 7 different products. Now, how do we really deepen even some of the messaging and the communication points around those products to show consumers how this one is for you? The Quantum 100 is for this consumer. The Quantum 1 is for this other consumer. But we want to rock with you all just the same. So that's how we're approaching it from a gaming perspective. And I think we're really excited about some of the things that we learned and we uncovered in year 1 that we will quickly be able to apply and start to benefit from in year 2 of our existence. And then from a broader JBL perspective,
let me ask you one question on that.
Sure.
Because you talked about those tournaments being, I think in 3 different regions. I'm curious, and I should have asked this before, but I'm curious, did you have to approach the content and the messaging different? And obviously you did in each of those regions because of the region, but did the circumstances around the year, COVID, other, also impact that, right? In that as well. And how did you guys, did you work with one agency or did you work locally to try to change that content?
So we have so it was one agency, but we have a strong network of regional marketers that really have their finger on the pulse of what's happening within those regions. And so
Right.
it's working with our agency, but then a lot of early morning and late night conversations with my counterparts in some of the other corners of the world to say, hey, this is what we're thinking. How might this work with your consumers? Is this something that's going to excite them? Is this the right title? Is this the right messaging? Is this the right path forward? And really allowing them to feedback and help to add to that process. Because yeah, it is slightly different. And even for a year where we were all planning on launching on the same day in like April of 2020, the moment that things started to shift, I got Asia picking one launch date. I have North America picking a different launch date, and then my friends in Europe picking a launch date that's even different than that. So they were even at different points in their life cycle as we were approaching our final event. And so what's going to be required in order for you to hit your consumers where they are and where you are within your life cycle and within your launch plans. And so it was a lot of engagement with the regions to really make sure that
Yep.
we were plowing those learnings in.
Yep. And then, and I'm curious, earned effect from the media from this. Obviously, you talked about you waking up this morning, the other morning, and seeing it. Right? Was there a lot of positive earned media out of it outside of this, outside of the social chatter overall? Did you guys get that from the program?
Absolutely. And I think it was cool to start to see that unfold. I mean, even the weekend up, you mentioned Reddit earlier.
Yeah.
We placed a couple of big bets from a media standpoint on Twitch and IGN.
Okay.
We didn't engage with Reddit, but
Reddit.
by the second day of the tournament, we had a Reddit page that was up that had already
That's
been
awesome.
started by consumers, and they were talking in real time about what was happening within the event. And so again, you look for those small kind of
Yeah.
notations that credibility is being garnered and gained. And I think that was another one of those instances there.
That's a perfect example. A lot of clients are afraid of Reddit to some extent too, but that's a perfect example of a great earned way on a platform that you guys weren't even, necessarily positioning. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. I guess we should, I think we have about 5 to 8 minutes left. So I guess we should ask questions, although I don't see many questions in the Q&A chat there. So I will throw it out to everyone. If not, you and I will keep on talking. Does anyone have any questions I want to ask Michael or I? No, we don't, Michael. So let's keep chatting a bit, unless I think someone from the Brand Innovator side is joining in and might want to cut us off. Martin, we're good?
No, this is not the cutoff, but I mean, we have a minute or two, but
Okay.
Sean, if you had a follow-up question you wanted to ask, certainly have time for that. If you had something else, but if not,
no, I mean, I think we covered it, right? I think Michael's given a great example of them being innovative and, on the foundation of data, but being able to shift. Michael, any last minute thoughts to everyone? We've had a great group of participants listening, I know. So.
No, I'd love to thank you guys for the opportunity to join in today. Thanks to Sean for handling me with care. Yeah, thanks for the folks who did tune in.
We did have a question that just came up.
Great.
Do you mind? I'll ask it right now. It said they wanted, Michael, the question was to you, is dive in deeper between your view of esports versus gaming as it relates to marketing to the audience. And
great question.
Having a 16-year-old who built his own computer and ordered a gaming chair who does gaming, but esports is a whole different ball of wax. So I'll let you take that, Michael.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very loosely, and it's the way that I kind of talk about it inside of our organization, is, gaming in a lot of instances is built a lot more around personality. So like that person is very good at a particular title or a set of titles, but they also have kind of the personality to carry a full stream, engage with their followers on an ongoing basis. People tune in to not just see them play, but also hear what they're going to say within that space. Esports is a lot more about a lot like the hardcore kind of best of the best within specific titles, kind of holistic teams that I have really honed their skill to be the best. And so whereas their content may be a lot more focused on just the game itself and their preparations and getting ready with their teammates to go into these spaces and do battle, I think the way that you would utilize them and how they would engage with your following is going to be slightly different.
Yeah, and for me personally, I mean, even on a personal level, like I've seen the transformation of my children from like, I was freaked out when they were watching people play video games on YouTube, and I'm like, how is that even fun? Like,
yeah, I have a 13-year-old that does it. Yep.
And you just kind of go, I'm not getting it, but then it's been sort of that transformation to like, much bigger in gaming, and I'm a gamer. We have like 3 platforms, but yet my son plays on his computer upstairs. And now you've got esports into that, which is you've got, sponsored teams and all this other stuff. Yes. And getting to that, kind of building off your last sort of statement, like how blown away are you, or, how prepared were you guys for the just excitement and everything that's happened in esports? Like,
it's been tremendous. I think so. I had a brush with gaming in a prior life, working on another brand, but it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember, agencies coming in to pitch me on the idea of working with gamers and potentially investing in esports. And the one thing that struck me is having very similar conversations this last go round. Those buy-in costs had increased, 10 to 15 fold. Like it was tremendous. But having had a chance to attend some of those events, I mean, you realize like these are extremely rabid, dedicated fans who love not just the game, not just the titles, being presented by the publishers, but love a lot of the esports and the players themselves, and how engaged they are within that platform. And so to garner an audience with them, to get an audience with them, you see why the price tag has gone up, because I want to wear the headset that my favorite gamer, my favorite player is wearing. I want that same keyboard. I want that same mouse. I want that exact same setup. And so if you can be a part of that package, it could be tremendously valuable for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Sean, I don't know if your son's yet at that stage, but yeah, my son he's got the light up multicolored keyboard. And
And
it's a host setup.
And but again, and I people fail to, I think a lot of times remember this, particularly young kids in a time of COVID, when they can't go out and play, or they only have 1 or 2 friends in their pod, particularly young males, right? Where else can they go? They're going to go online. They're going to play video games. They're going to watch video games, but then they're utilizing the chat, right? And their video camera with their friends who they would normally be in school with,
right,
to play together or to watch together, right? Yeah. So, or to watch it, in this case, it might be to watch an esports league or just to watch their favorite streamers. So as parents, I struggle with, after 4 o'clock, my kid's on his set computer for 4 hours, but let's be honest, you can't. It's their only way of it's their way of socially interacting and at least talking to people live. Absolutely. And that's what's key, I think, that advertisers can remember during this time, whether you're gaming or not, is that you've got the opportunity now to have these massively audiences